People are dead and more than 28,000 infected with coronavirus around the world. That's if the Chinese are telling the truth.
Trucks passes through the northern Italian city of Bergamo. Crematorium so overwhelmed that the military is transporting the dead.
Una, due, tre.
And there are many, many dead.
We have the worst kind of breaking news. Washington Post reporting that for the first time, coronavirus deaths in this country surpassed 100 in one day, and 500 total. Claire McCaskill, we're reaching horrific kinds of milestones in this country.
Cough, runny nose, don't feel very well. With coronavirus, since it's a respiratory virus, it tends to settle in the lungs and people start getting shortness of breath. That's the telltale sign, along with exposure in Wuhan, China, or exposure to somebody who's been in Wuhan, China.
What's up, fam? Hope everybody is being blessed today. I hope you just got a smile on your face, that you find something to smile about, find something to laugh about. I think you ought to experience laughter every day of your life. Life is too short to not laugh, and especially in times like these, guys. If you don't find a reason to laugh, it'll keep you crying and sad and melancholy. Will just be on you. So find something to laugh about. I mean, laugh at yourself. Remember, find something to put a smile on your face. The scriptures tell us that laughter is like medicine. And if you can't find anything to laugh about, find something to be thankful for. And certainly we can be thankful that God has blessed us, and we can be thankful that we're still alive. As you know, Hope TV, we've been committed to doing ministry a long time, but we really wanted to really ramp up our efforts to make sure that our e-church and our online church and those who follow us are blessed and have some good quality content and programming throughout this pandemic. This thing has been something that we've never seen before. The effects of it have been cataclysmic. It's literally shut down the whole world. It's affected me because early on, when I found out about the pandemic, I was one of the ones who felt that as a church, when they said we should avoid mass social gatherings, that we decided to not have mass gatherings. And there's been a lot of conversation back and forth, whether that's the right thing, whether live by faith or fear. And I'm not getting to that. You know my stance on that. But we have believed in adhering to public safety and doing what we thought was in the best interest of our membership and what we think is in the best interest of society and the medical field as a whole. But I've been affected by that just as a pastor trying to protect our people. But at the same time, I realized that even despite our best efforts to not have mass gatherings, you can't protect everybody. We've had 8 members of our church who've been diagnosed with COVID-19, with the coronavirus. 8 of them, 6 of them have been in the ICU. 3 of them are still on ventilators as we speak. And we've been talking about those who've been affected by coronavirus. But I want to talk to somebody today who is affected. There's a member of our church, a faithful member of our church. He's a native of Warner Robins, Georgia, Middle Georgia, where I'm from. He's not just from Middle Georgia, went to Houston County High School there in Middle Georgia, moved to Atlanta. He's 28 years of age, so this is not somebody who's elderly, not somebody who's in their 60s, or not grandma, not grandpa. He works for MARTA in the 911 dispatch area, and he's a member of our church, and he's been in quarantine after being diagnosed with coronavirus, COVID-19. I want to welcome him. He's still quarantined as we speak right now, and I want you guys to hear from him. We've been praying for him. I want you to meet, guys, Christian Perry. Christian, can you come on in, bro? How you doing?
I'm doing great, Pastor.
Man, I'm so glad you're doing well. I'm so glad you're here. We share the same barber, and Sam told me about the situation. And, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but when he told me that you had coronavirus, I need to ask him when was the last time he had seen you, because if he had seen you recently, I was going to have to find me another barber, because I wasn't going to sit in that chair. You just got to, you just got to tell the truth and shame the devil. I was just going to, the spirit of dreadlocks that come over your pastor in Jesus' name. So, but he informed me that he hadn't seen you in a couple of weeks, so that made me feel better for myself. And that's a little selfish, but made me very concerned about you. Can you tell us what happened? And you're healthy. How did you contract it? What happened? Give us some of your story, please.
Yes. So I typically really good health. I'm a diabetic, but other than that, I work out every day, go to work, do my normal routine. And it just so happened that around March 5th or March 4th, I started feeling just terrible, Pastor. Just started getting these migraines. and I've never been one to have migraines. I've gotten headaches in the past, but never blinding migraines. And so, as you can imagine, being a 911 call taker, you're answering phones all day, you're talking to people, your environment can be noisy. And so I was mustering through and going to work, even with the loud noise. Had been asking, could we dim the lights in the center? Could we just turn the volume down on radios? But when you're working in that type of environment, you have to keep everything up because you're alert. And so I had did that for about a week and a half, going to work, dealing with the headaches. And on the 11th, I was at work, and the pain just became unbearable. I was doing some calls, doing some work, and was talking to a coworker and noticed that I could not even open my eyes any longer. And that was midway through the shift. So I noticed that my vision in my left eye started going out. So I wasn't seeing my computer workstation clearly. So I wasn't able to dispatch calls like I normally do. And so I realized that something was definitely wrong. I also studied public health. So I started doing some research, contacting some colleagues, and they were saying, hey, I don't think you can go home. Today is not the day to go home. And I've always been trustworthy of my heart, big on my faith. And so I always, even in my mom's, even though she's late and past about 10 years now, I always still ask her questions just as if she's here with me. And
I
so
understand.
I I sat back at work, took my lunch break, and during the lunch break, I didn't eat on the 11th. Just sat in prayer, and sat in conversation with my mom. And so the Spirit led me after work. You've got to go to the AC, which is the advanced care here in Atlanta for Kaiser. And so I got home, called my family. My family went with me to the AC, very concerned. And prior to me going to the AC on the 11th, I had gone to the AC on the 9th as well. But they sent me home. They said, oh, it's a little fever. You'll be fine. Came back on the 11th. While sitting in the emergency room, I began to develop what they call the chills. And my headache became so extreme that I could no longer even open my eyes in the ER. And so I went into triage, and the nurse immediately, as she saw me in triage, she became alert. She was alarmed. I was in the ER, didn't have a mask on, didn't have any type of PPE on. But as soon as I went back in triage, I was given a mask. I was told not to touch anything. Um, my temperature, before I left work, I was fine, no temperature. Sitting in the AC, I developed a fever of 102.5. And so the nurse was very busy. There was other cases going on in the AC, but I became one of the priority patients in the AC. So immediately they told my family, we're going to have you all sit in the waiting room. We can no longer have you all make contact with him. So I was taken back to the back, given a room. And while this was going on with the chills and the sweats, my sugar bottomed out. Being a diabetic, I wasn't supposed to have any of those medications because they have a lot of sugar base. And so my sugar dropped down to 43. So I had to have an emergency IV. After having to search all over for an IV, she was able to stick me. I had to get 2 sticks because they were afraid they were going to lose one vein. So I was stuck in what they call the brachial, and I was also stuck in the right here in the carotid, that's last resort. When they go into your neck,
Wow.
that's it. That's last resort. Your body's not functioning.
Wow.
And so we got the 2 sticks. We lost the one in the carotid. So she had to pull it out of the neck. Body began to shut down. So I was administered some antibiotics. I had to have an emergency MRI, CAT scan, chest X-ray. So it was a lot of commotion, a lot going on. And then while I was still conscious and they hadn't given me any Benadryl or anything just yet, I noticed that everybody started coming in the room suited up. Everybody had PPE on. And so this was around the 11th. So the migraines were not a symptom at this time. That wasn't a part of the symptomatic protocol that they were looking for. And so the nurse had asked me, had I been out of the country? I said, no. I work so much as a dispatcher, we don't get to travel out a lot. So I hadn't been out of the country. But she asked, where did I work? And I told her I work in a 911 center. And we're close quarters at MARTA.
Right.
And so did that. After that, I began to sweat uncontrollably. So the doctor became very concerned. So then they administered some more antibodies through the IV. And we were able to control the headaches. And so right after that, she said, I'm going to have to administer an emergency COVID-19 test. I looked at her and I said, I haven't been symptomatic. She said, it's protocol from this point on. And at this time, this is March 11th. We don't have many kits in the state of Georgia, henceforth around the world. So she said, we have to do it the first time and it has to be correct because I can't waste this test. And so knowing how public health works, I sat up. She said, it's going to hurt. I'm going to have to go in the back of your nose and enter at the back of your sinus. And so she went straight in and it hurt. It was painful. And I began to cough. And she said, there's no phlegm. There's no type of congestion. Your cough seems to be one of our symptoms. I said, I just developed that while I was sitting here at the hospital. So we did all the testing. And I was released about 4 a.m. the next morning. Went home. They came under the idea that it was pneumonia. So I went home on antibiotics thinking that it was pneumonia. And 5 days later, on that Friday, I went in to get my release for work. And the doctor called me and said, where are you? I said, I'm sitting at the home with my family. She said, I have 15 minutes for you to get home, lock your door, and don't leave. I got in the car. I drove home across town. She called me back. It was like 15 minutes on the dot. She said, I need you to lock your door. You're going to be home for about a week now. I couldn't believe my ears. She said, you just tested positive for COVID-19. You cannot leave your home. I called my cousin. Because I was there with her children. I was watching the kids as she was working. So immediately my family was being placed under quarantine. And so it was a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And at that time, the biggest thing hit me, Pastor, was, am I in a predicament where I may have killed my godchildren at this point? And so the anxiety levels were high. Just didn't know what to do. Called their mother. She was at work. She had to rush home from work. And then so that placed her into quarantine. Once she entered the home, everywhere I had been was now considered contaminated. And so ever since March 11th, I've been here at home. But through grace, through faith, I've been doing things that people most typically consider common cold remedies. And we have to thank God for grandmama and granddaddy, especially down in Macon in the middle Georgia area, raising us and teaching us different things, because I immediately had my family run to the store, grab me some lemon, grab me some honey. I began pulling out the old remedies of our homes and just drinking natural teas. I'm big on tea anyways, but I began to drink strictly green tea and elderberry, which are great benefits for building the immune system and helping with brain health. And so doing that every day, opening up this window that I love sitting in front of and getting some vitamin D and sunlight, and sometimes it sounds cliche to people, but prayer. Um, just remaining constant in prayer, having great colleagues and a best friend from Houston call every day and call about 4 or 5 hours a day, just sitting and talking and making sure I'm alive and I'm well. Um,
Wow.
and the worst of it was about 4 days ago. Could not stop vomiting. The fever spiked again. Um, the headaches were extreme. So just having a great friend and having a family to video call, thank God for FaceTime and video chats that we could, while I was going through these symptoms here at the house alone, having family to be able to watch. And if anything went just completely left, being able to notify authorities. But the pain of the headaches, I can't begin to stress how painful the headaches were. So the symptoms, as I spoke to one of the doctors from the CDC the other day, when I was doing my clearance, and spoke to a health official from the Department of Health, there's no guidelines still. We're still
Wow.
to this day with no guidelines. So me being released back to work last week was it was null and void. I'm out of work until guidelines can be created, because what they're unsure of still as we speak is we don't know if we can be reinfected once we enter our environments. And so just like we have our family and friends who are in the hospital, we don't know when they can be released, because coming back out into what we consider everyday traffic and routine could reintroduce us to the virus, which right now has no cure or no vaccine.
So you're telling me you've been in the house since March 11th?
Yes, sir. I'll
And
go out.
you can't, so you,
So the only thing I've been allowed to do as of Friday, I was able to get clearance to go. We have a trail here in the neighborhood, so I'm able to walk the trail in the evening when it's minimal to no traffic on the trail. I have to walk with a face mask on, and if I'm going to touch anything, I have to wear gloves.
wow. So you start feeling bad on March the 5th. You went to the doctor first time March 9th, then went back March 11th. Then they called you 4 days later to say you had COVID-19.
Yes, sir.
That's a brutal process. And you were in church the first Sunday in March, right?
No, I worked so much, so I wasn't able to make service. But
Okay.
just
Well,
as
I
you
guess that's
spoke,
good.
yes, and us
Yeah.
sharing Sam as a barber. Actually, on
Right.
the 19th, when I found out, I immediately called Sam. I was on my way in for a haircut actually later that morning. I called him. I was telling him, I said, hey, I can't come in. And initially, I had a shame. I thought this was an embarrassment. So I didn't tell him initially. We were on the phone and we were talking. We're real cool buddies. Um, and something led me to say, hey, Christian, you have to tell him exactly what's going on. And
Right.
it just so happened that Sam and Pastor, one of our ministers there at House of Hope, Mel Smith, was sitting in the chair,
Right.
and they were able to listen. And he said, thank you so much for calling in. Thank you for canceling your appointment. Um, and my biggest thing at that point, Pastor, was some people don't take the time to think of others. But in that moment, I knew
Right.
that I couldn't be the face and the host of affecting a lot of our men and women who come throughout that wonderful place of business.
Let me ask you this. So how your godchildren, the ones that you were babysitting, have they been tested since that time? And your cousin, how are they?
Um, the mother was able to be tested because at this time we're still low on PPE and low on testing. The kids are just
Okay.
having to wait. We're having to monitor them 3 or 4 times a day. We're checking
Okay.
temperatures. We're looking for signs and symptoms. Being that my 6-year-old godson, he's an asthmatic, suffers from bronchitis already, so we're having to watch him
Wow.
extra closely. He
Right.
coughs or sneezes, we're on the phone with physicians just
Right.
to make
Yeah.
sure we don't need to come in.
Yeah, and with this pollen and those who have allergies already, it's just it only intensifies it. You know, I just
Right.
not has it affected any of your other family members? Have they had to be quarantined, or what's going on with your
Um,
other family members who've been around you?
as of right now, everyone else seems to be healthy, seems to be doing fine. Just that home, just their home was the only one that had to be quarantined during
Okay.
this time. My aunt called up from Macon. Definitely um, thankful for her. She's a prayer warrior. Every day she calls and prays um, because this is scary. You don't know.
Absolutely.
You don't know if you'll wake up from the nights. You don't know if you'll make it through the day. And so having prayer warriors has been my biggest blessing thus far.
So Tim, what are some of the signs? What are some of the signs and symptoms that we should pay extra attention to right now?
So the biggest signs and symptoms right now that have been most common are is the dry cough. And what that means is some people get it confused with pollen cough. If you've been exposed to pollen or your allergies, you may get just a seasonal cough. But what a dry cough is there's nothing there. It constricts your breathing, and there's no phlegm, there's no congestion, there's no mucus. And so that's
Okay.
been the number one sign, along with shortness of breath. Speaking to one of the epidemiologists, I've even heard some people just stop breathing suddenly,
Wow.
asymptomatic, and then they just develop that symptom. And also the headaches now. Migraines are being ruled across the board as a symptom now. And it's not just your typical migraine, because I do know we have migraine sufferers in the world and across our nation. But this migraine in particular, Pastor, it's almost a blinding migraine that comes right from behind the frontal lobes that affects your retina. I forgot to even explain to you, Pastor, I had a portion last week where my retina ruptured. So I had to have injections in both eyes. Um,
Gee.
and so you have to be careful because they can blow what we call our retinas, and which can cause blindness, early
Wow.
onset blindness.
Wow.
So those biggest symptoms, signs and symptoms are the dry cough, heavier labored breathing, and your migraines. And if experiencing fever is greater than 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
How do you feel now?
Feel much better. Not my baseline. Um, Again, I'm usually active and walking and running around and exercising, but just trying to build back up my endurance and stamina. Um, Today, even right now, is showing me that I'm definitely getting even better as far as talking. For about a week, I wasn't doing much talking. Shortness of breath just after 2 or 3 words. So definitely recovering.
How's your faith?
Faith has been never better. Um, and to be honest, Pastor, it does test your faith. I'm always transparent. And being that, I study different forms of public health, the mental health has been my concern for our nation. Um, Anxiety, depression, worrying. Um, just as you've given that sermon this morning, which was a beautiful sermon, I think this is our cry. These are our roosters. Um, they're giving us our call because some people just aren't holding on to that faith. I had a story of a colleague up north near New York Presbyterian. Their suicide rates are increasing. Their anxiety rates are increasing. They're seeing more forms of concern on what we call demented patients. And so the fact that I still have my mind and I'm in good health has been above and
Amen.
beyond. Each morning that I wake up and I know that I can pray, I sit up in that bed and I'm thankful that I still have my mind, because I've heard such other stories of those who haven't made it through this diagnosis.
Right. So what advice do you give to people right now? Any advice you want to give?
Um, my biggest advice is be smart and be cognitive, not of just your surroundings, but your own actions. I've been hearing a lot of different people on social media, all of our different challenges. They're making great, beautiful music and short clips for us, but they need to understand the severity of this virus and understand that the precautions and the boundaries that our government may and have set are only for the best benefit of our interest. Because I've been looking at numbers, I've been following John Hopkins and World Health Organization. Our numbers are projected to reach hundreds of thousands of deaths. And I looked
Right.
the other day, and we're only at 20 something thousand here in the state, here in the United States. And so when you think of the numbers and you think of the statistics, my biggest advice can only be, let's not make one another statistics. We don't want to be those numbers that don't make it.
Young man, I always observe you when you're in worship and your spirit and who you are and where you're from, and this opportunity to get to know more from you. I want to thank you for being a survivor. I want to thank you for your testimony. You were amongst the first cases here, diagnosed cases here in Georgia. You're amongst the first.
Yes, sir.
And the fact that you're on this phone and you're alive, I want you to know that the church is praying for you. Your pastor's praying for you. You've got an extended community that you've inspired. I called and wanted to do this webinar and this conversation with you to kind of inspire and encourage you. And you've ended
Yes,
up
sir.
encouraging us. And I just believe that God's going to bring more ministry out of your misery, and your pain has purpose. And so you be
Indeed.
encouraged and keep your faith. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for giving the information, because knowledge is power. And I
Yes.
can't wait to see what God's going to do to you and what God's going to do for you. I want to pray with you right quick. And I'm going to ask everybody who's watching at home, you touch your iPad or your cell phone, if you're watching at home, your laptop, just to connect your faith with ours so we can pray for Christian together. Lord, I thank you that you do all things well. Thank you for your power, your grace. Thank you that you promised to be Jehovah Rophi, Jehovah Rapha. You promised to be our healer, and I thank you for the healing power. You say that those of us who can pray the prayer of faith, and that we can come bold before your throne to obtain mercy and find grace to help in our time of need. Would you release now your healing, your ministering angels to Christian Perry? Thank you that you've kept him and you've allowed him to survive. Thank you, Lord, that in spite of what he's gone through, he still has a testimony that you are a keeper. Now keep him, sustain him, bring him back to total normalcy with nothing lacking, nothing broken, nothing missing. May his example be a source of encouragement and strength to others who are not dealing with just with COVID-19, but other issues. Let his life be a testimony that you can bring us through. Continue to bring him through. Bless his family. Would you be a hedge of protection around those, his godchildren, his entire family? Keep them as co